Hey, what's up everyone? My name's Thomas, welcome back to the channel, and today we're talking about what camera you should buy. And before we get started, I just wanted to say that gear does matter. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, gear doesn't matter, but ultimately it does. And before you get crazy and start commenting all this crazy stuff, gear matters in the sense that if you don't have the right tool for the job, it's going to make your life a lot harder. But that's not saying that specs trump everything. Like you need 6K 120, full frame, in IBIS to like get the perfect shot. If you don't know how to shoot well, composing. If you don't know how to light, compose, even just hold a camera, you're not going to get a good shot. So I feel like we have to get the fundamentals down of knowing how to be a filmmaker before we start getting all gear crazy. But ultimately, you need to find the right tool for the job to honestly make your life a lot easier when you're on set. And before you start chasing gear, just get out and shoot a ton. Go shoot vlogs, go shoot short films, shoot around the house, your backyard, like your neighborhood. Just go out, make a lot of videos, make a lot of mistakes, learn through trial and error, and eventually you'll start to learn what features you actually want in a camera. And with all that experience, you'll probably save a lot of money from not buying the camera that's hyped the most at the time. And you'll end up buying the camera that you'll actually need and use from now and down the road. Ultimately, your workflow and making your life easier on set is more important than having the biggest and best and latest specs. And if we're all honest with ourselves, we can get by with 1080 or 4K in only 24 frames per second. We don't need... And if we're honest with ourselves, we can get by with 1080 or 4K at 24 frames per second. And it's such a crazy time to be a filmmaker because the whole market is really good. There's really no bad cameras out right now. Each camera is geared towards like a different style of shooting. You have cinema cameras, you have action cameras, you have mirrorless, and you have cameras that are best suited for shooting raw externally or raw internally. And cameras don't have raw, cameras do have raw. There's autofocus, IBIS, there's so many different cameras on the market. It's kind of hard to choose a bad one, but it's really easy to make the wrong decision and finding the right camera for yourself. So I've bought a few cameras in my career, and coincidentally, I'm looking to buy a new one right now. So I'm actually using these steps in researching the next camera for me. And I figured this video would be helpful for you guys. When purchasing gear or cameras, it's important to really dig in and see what you actually need and want to find the right fit for you so you don't make a mistake and end up losing money or just regretting your purchase. So for step one, ask yourself this question: what are my needs? Understanding your needs really helps you get a realistic viewpoint on what you actually want out of a camera. This starting point will really narrow down a lot of the cameras in the market. Do you want something light and compact? Do you want something a little more robust that'll give you better quality? Do you want a cinema camera to use on a bigger set where you have a first AC and a whole crew to really support your camera? So really the needs and wants are, it's kind of inclusive with the whole process, but ultimately it's basically the form factor and type of camera geared towards your shooting. And that leads us to the next question: what are you currently shooting? So it's important to look at the kind of work that you're currently making. Are you shooting weddings? Are you shooting docs? Are you doing commercials? Are you doing studio work? Are you a YouTuber? Are you doing travel films? All of these different types of fields and industries kind of require a different type of camera. Doc filmmakers and wedding filmmakers kind of need the same type of camera where you have a really light and fast setup that gives you a great image and really good onboard audio. Commercial and studio, you can kind of build out a rig like a Pocket 6K or a Red. You're not too worried about mobility and ease of use. Travel filmmakers often go towards mirrorless cameras like the R5 or the A7S III. And YouTubers use a whole array of cameras. They use point and shoots, they use their phones, cinema cameras, mirrorless. Really looking at what you're currently shooting just gets you a little bit more realistic rather than like daydreaming about what you could be shooting and like want to be shooting. You really need to gear that camera, especially if you're buying now, you need to gear that camera towards the work that you're currently making. So then the next question, what do you plan to shoot? That's important as well. Knowing where you want to grow in your career and where you want to end up can kind of help you gear that camera towards that down the road so you don't have to buy too many. But sometimes your use case is you need a mirrorless camera now and you want to grow into a cinema camera. That's okay. Understanding that your mirrorless camera won't give you what a cinema camera can offer is good, and it allows you to budget and make decisions on what camera you're using now and where you're going to upgrade in the future. And for those of us with a tight budget, it really helps us kind of keep in control of what cameras we're buying. Say we're shooting weddings and we're looking at buying a mirrorless camera, but we want to end up doing documentaries. looking at where you want to end up and where you're at, you can kind of see like, okay, could I get by with a cinema camera shooting weddings? I would say so, unless you're doing a ton of gimbal work. Most cinema cameras don't really fit well on gimbals unless they're really big and expensive. But seeing the ebb and flow of what you're shooting and what you want to shoot can kind of help you make that decision on compromising or not compromising on a camera. Next up, the one that a lot of people focus on. What specs do you want? A lot of people make specs their main deciding factor in buying a camera. And some of the key specs are dynamic range, autofocus, frame rates, slow motion, IBIS, internal ND, 4K, 6K, RAW, 10-bit versus 8-bit, XLR, mini XLR, good battery life, form factor, the media you record to, face tracking autofocus. There's so many different types of specs out there. They really just help make the process easier, and sometimes you do need 120 FPS. Sometimes you need autofocus. Just being realistic with the specs that you want, because it's good to want good specs and future-proof your camera, but ultimately you can't be chasing specs and expecting it to make your stuff really good when you haven't been trained well or you're not dialing in your craft. Specs aren't a crutch. If you don't know how to shoot well, it's not going to look too good. So specs are important, and knowing what you want will also help narrow down the process. And then next up after that, what are your deal breakers? For some, deal breakers are lack of RAW, lack of IBIS, and lack of autofocus. Those are three kind of main things that a lot of people don't want to give up when buying a camera. Sometimes it could even be a brand, like you don't want to switch from Sony to Canon, or you don't want to leave Canon or Blackmagic. Sometimes brand loyalty can really keep you kind of tied in to a certain type of camera, but be open to switching camera brands. Sometimes deal breakers are more important than specs. It just really weeds out what you don't want to give up, and everything else just becomes bonus. But as long as you have those major deal breakers in your camera, you'll be pretty stoked. And then the last question, what's your budget? And this one is really boring and not fun, and it's hard to be realistic with this one, but it's really important to be realistic because you don't want to get a camera that tacks on a ton of accessories that makes your $2,000 camera actually $5,000 or $5 to $10. You just need to know beforehand what this camera is going to include to get it rigged up, set up for you to shoot and actually create. Keep in mind, for most things you'll need a microphone, you'll need batteries, you'll need recording media, you'll need a lens. Sometimes you need ND filters or a matte box or an external monitor, cage, top handle, cables, a whole rig setup with rails and a V-mount. There's so many different ways to really accessorize a camera, and if you're willing to put the budget in and rig it out, by all means. But sometimes a lot of us, myself included, want something simple, and you don't really want to have a ton of accessories, just adding more clutter to your house and making your rig more complicated. So yeah, being realistic with your budget is important because ultimately it's money and you need this for your business, but you also don't want to go broke and have a really expensive camera that you don't really need. So those are all my questions that I use in finding a camera. And like I said in the last question, looking at your budget, I actually have some recommendations for different budget ranges. So I wanted to give you guys a bunch of different cameras in these certain budget ranges to really help you out. And if I missed any, please leave them below because I don't really know too many. So for the under $4,000 range, we have the whole Blackmagic Pocket series. We have the 4K, 6K, 6K Pro. We have the EOS R6. We have the EOS R. And I think the EOS R5 fits in that as well. I think it's 3500. We have the Sony a7 III, the S1H, the S5, as well as the GH5. All these cameras give you some really solid specs for a really cheap price. Besides the pocket cameras, they're all mirrorless, and I feel like those are a really good option for getting into some really good cameras. Under the $10,000 range, we have the C70, we have the Komodo, FX6, C300, A7S III, and the A1. Those ones are definitely a step up in quality and are more cinema camera based, except for the A1 and the A7S III. Those are like top of the line mirrorless cameras. All those cinema cameras I just named are really good options under that budget. And if you're over the $10,000 range, you're looking at Red Geminis, you're looking at the C500, you're looking at rigs that cost a lot more than people's cars. And good on you, but that's a really small percentage of people, unless you're running a company that can afford that. So we went through all of that, and I think this will help you guys out even more. And like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm looking at upgrading my camera. I have the Pocket 6K right now. I'm pretty over it. I want to upgrade it, and I've been researching a ton, I feel like if I were to go through those questions and tell you my reasons, it would kind of make things a little more demystified or less confusing if they were throughout the video. So, my dream camera. What are my needs? Well, I want something small and minimal. I don't want to rig it out a ton with big batteries and a matte box and external monitors. I want something small and tight, but gives me the most bang for buck per se. I want internal ND, I want onboard audio, I want something simple with great color that I can honestly run from now for like 5, 6, 7 years down the road. What am I shooting currently? Well, right now for work, I'm shooting with Samuel Elkins. We're doing a lot of run and gun stuff. We're doing stuff in the studio, and we're shooting it on the Canon C70, which has honestly been a really great camera to use. The color is insane. The internal ND is amazing to use. The onboard audio makes studio work as well as dock work really easy, getting crisp, clean audio with multiple inputs. It honestly makes our workflow a lot quicker than when I was using the Pocket 6K for work with him. What do I plan to shoot? Well, I plan to honestly keep working with Sam, and I plan to keep doing doc stuff. I really want to get into commercial brand work and shoot with like beer companies or clothing companies and just do a lot of lifestyle, like short form commercials. And I feel like what I'm shooting now and the commercial work, I feel like I can get a camera that can honestly do both really well. As long as I get something that's reliable and durable, I'm good to go. So what specs do I want? Well, I want at least 4K, I want at least 10-bit, I want a really good log profile, I want internal ND, I don't want to have to deal with VNDs or matte boxes or color shifts. Autofocus would be nice, RAW could be nice. IBIS, I don't really need that, but I could take that. And honestly, I want a lens mount that would work well with a mirrorless camera, because eventually I want to get a cinema camera and a mirrorless camera and have one lens system. I don't want to have a Sony setup and a Canon setup. I want to have one lens line to run across both. So as long as I can find a cinema camera that has a really good mirrorless B cam, that's something I'm looking at too. So for my deal breakers, honestly, it's onboard audio and internal ND. I can get by with just about everything, but having internal ND just makes shooting a lot quicker. I don't have to worry about color shifting or vignetting with VNDs or have a big old matte box. I can go from 2 stops to 10 stops internally and get crisp looking footage that's super clean. And having onboard audio just makes shooting A-roll a lot easier. When you're out shooting docs and have lavs and a shotgun, you can run so many different sources of audio and have it be really good. And having weak preamps is just kind of useless. Like, you won't be able to bring the gain up. Like, the noise floor would be way too high. And then for my budget, I think I'm looking around the 10K mark for everything. That's with a microphone, a monitor if I need, batteries, media, lens, rig. And by rig, I mean like a top plate or a bottom plate, as well as the body. And I think the 10K mark is a pretty good range. My pocket kit was about 5 or 6 with everything, and I just have way too much crap for that. And I don't really want to do that again. I just want to have a simple setup, the body, a lens, a battery inside, SD cards inside, and maybe run a monitor on top. But I think the 10K mark is pretty reasonable to find a really good cinema camera that I want. So what cameras am I looking at? So as you guys may have known, I was cross-shopping the C70 and the Komodo for a while, but we just shot with both of those at the last field trips. And honestly, the Komodo's off my list. It's more of a commercial studio kind of camera where you have a big crew, you have more time, you're going shot by shot. It's not really a run and gun dock camera. The preamps are really weak. It takes way too long to turn on. You have to black shade it every time there's like a 15-degree change in temperature, which takes another 2.5 minutes. It doesn't have internal ND, and I don't really want to run adapters. And you have to use a VND or matte boxes, but then you get weird color shifts with it. The battery life isn't too good, the file sizes are huge. It just didn't really work as well and as fast as the C70. And honestly, I think I'm set on the C70. It gives me everything I need. Great battery life, cheap media. It gives me RF mount so I can have an R5 or an R6 as a travel camera. Internal ND makes life so easy, so fast. Onboard audio. C-Log 2 is gorgeous to work with. And it's all in one little tight body, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. Yeah, and the 4K codec with 10-bit is plenty. I haven't missed RAW once with this camera, and honestly, I don't really need it for this camera. So yeah, that's the one that I'm planning on getting, and if they release another camera with the RF mount, I'll probably go that route, but I think building out a set around the RF line with the R6 and the C70, that's ultimately a really solid kit that you can use for really anything. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it can really help out your journey in finding the right camera for your needs. If you're researching a camera and you have a lot of questions, leave a comment below. And if you've already bought one, I'd love to know why you bought the camera and the steps that you took towards that. So yeah, with all that, we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.